It's Wednesday, August 16th, 2023. And for just to be honest, that's the third time I've said this so far, thanks to technical issues. But that means with technical issues also means it's time for the Knee Jerks podcast of Eno and Big L. And we are missing Eno this week as Greg is touring Michigan in his RV and having the time of his life, I believe. According to at least I last checked on Facebook, he was in Mackinac City on the beaches there. So we have our replacement for the man who knows a lot of things about a lot of things. I won't call him a replacement because that would be an insult because he is now a regular. He is a co-host. He is a co-content creator, and that's Nick Milanovich. Nick, how are we doing today?
Not too bad, Al. A little bit hot over here. It's our hot week of the year out west, but not too bad.
Mm-hmm. Good. I heard you've been hiking.
I have.
Yes.
Took a couple of hikes last week. One Thursday night or Thursday during the day, Mount Rainier.
Mm-hmm.
If you ever get a chance to go hike it or go even to the park, I highly recommend it. Fantastic hike. Really killed my knees, but it was well worth it. And then on Friday, I went again. Now this time to Mount Baker.
Yeah.
And went hiking there as well. Beautiful time.
And you missed the Lions game, am I correct?
Yes. And criticize me if you want to, but honestly, I don't care.
Well, that's the thing. I can say the same thing, Nick, because I just got back from 11 days up, as we say in Michigan, up north, up in Traverse City. And I didn't watch the Lions game either. I didn't watch any Tigers baseball. I spent my time being productive with cabin things and drinking beer and having campfires and making repairs. That's essentially your life when you have a vacation home, so to speak, as Linda does. And we spend far too much of our time keeping things in order, if anything else. But I had a really good time. I'm also exhausted, though, so I can relate with you. I don't have sore knees. I just have a sore body at this point. But be that as it may, I'm so used to Greg saying, it's time for the birthday game, but we always skip the birthday game when Greg's not here. So honestly, I don't think we have anything else to do, but other than start hitting topics. We don't even have a guest this week. It's just Nick and I talking sports. So hold on to your hold on your horses.
Hold on to something.
Yeah, exactly. We'll see what we get to on this show because we have a lot of Tigers stuff to talk about. Jim Price passed away. We have Miguel Cabrera kind of having a little bit of a comeback. So the young players doing stuff. The Red Wings made a big trade once kind of out of nowhere. We'll touch on Jeff Petry becoming a Red Wing. There's some Lions stuff to talk about. We're not going to talk about the exhibition game because even if I did watch it or Nick watched it, what's to talk about? Because realistically, most of the guys playing in that game are never going to see the regular season field. So we have some big picture stuff to talk about because they made an important signing and maybe a little college football as well. So we will start with the Detroit Tigers. So
right on.
Yeah. So this is one thing that completely surprised me when I was up north, Nick, is I'm sitting there by the campfire. I am getting notifications on my phone, and all of a sudden Michael Lorenzen is in the late part of a no-hitter. I'm like, what in the hell? Because we had just talked about Lorenzen. He was the one guy Scott Harris was able to trade and getting hopefully a blue chip prospect for him. But he's been literally lights out with the Phillies so far in 2 games. He's 2-0 with a 1.06 ERA, and he threw the first Phillies no-hitter since 2015. This is one of those things where, Lorenzen was really pitching well for the Tigers, but all you can do is laugh, And I was rooting for the guy. I wanted him to get the no-hitter. I wish he would have done it with the Tigers, but, that's baseball, I guess is the best way to put it.
I don't think the Tigers would have ever let him go 9 innings.
yeah, that's a good point.
So who knew? And I mean, when I heard about it, I'm happy he got it. Kudos to him. It's not an easy thing to pull off ever, even if most guys are swinging at everything these days. But it was fantastic. And I would say this is like one of the more a perfect Tigers thing to happen.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And it sounds like he was what they say effectively wild. I think he had like 4 or 5 walks in this game. And that means with a pitcher like him that his stuff is so good he can barely control it. And it was pretty obvious the hitters had no idea. They the hitters couldn't do anything with it either. So, it's just one of those things that it really feels like that's such a Detroit sports story, in that someone who just gets traded becomes a hero in freaking Philadelphia.
That's right.
Yeah.
To add in that sort of artificial extra thing is that it was Dave Dombrowski that picked him up.
Yes,
of course.
Yeah, of course.
Just add that to the whole fire, right?
Yeah. And what's the odds Dave Dombrowski is going to win a trade? Pretty darn good. We have experience seeing that. So, but honestly, probably the biggest news over the past couple of weeks at the Tigers was actually some sad news, Nick, and that was Jim Price passed away. He was a former Tigers catcher caught during their go get 'em Tigers era, that of the late 60s, early 70s. He was on the World Series team in 68. He was Bill Freehan's longtime backup. And then he became a broadcaster and has worked for the Tigers, TV and radio side for about 3 decades at this point. And over the last probably 15, 20 years, he worked radio and became pretty comfortable with Dan Dickerson. So he was 81 years old. And he wasn't much of a ball player. He was he was your typical 1960s backup catcher. He hit 214 of 18 home runs and 71 RBI in I think 5 or 6 seasons with the Tigers. Your typical good field no hit backup catcher. It seemed like they were dime a dozen in the 60s. That was your typical guy behind the plate. So, but after that, he kind of eased into broadcasting, and he kind of became the. I won't say he wasn't the voice of the team, but he was, for the last few decades, he was the voice beside the voice of the team.
Yeah, he would have been after the time I left Michigan is when he would have taken over. So my time ends with Ernie and Paul Carey.
Yeah.
So
that's when did Paul Carey leave the broadcast? So no, he left first, but the voice of God, as they used to call him.
Oh man, he had that like deep voice.
Yes, because I remember listening to him on WJR when he was he was often the sports update guy during the shows when WJR was still worth listening to.
Yeah, I think didn't he leave about the same time, roughly the same time? Who is it? Bo pushed out.
Yeah, I think
Ernie?
you're right. Right? Yeah, the whole transition was going on, but with Monahan selling the team to. That whole era is kind of a big mess when you think about it. When you got an ex-college football coach as the president of operations, and they're trying to force out the broadcast team, and some getting to be retirement age, and it was a really ugly situation going back then. And obviously Ernie Harwell, bless his heart, they wanted him to retire graceful, and he was not. He wasn't going to go kicking and screaming. And correctly made a scene. He made this public that they're pushing me out. I don't want to leave. And but that's how badly this franchise was run back then when the Ilitches were horrible owners till they weren't.
Yeah. I mean, we've gone through a lot in the last 35 years with them, right?
Yes, exactly. But Price, he actually did some play-by-play. I vaguely remember this. The precursor to Fox Sports, which is now Bally Sports, was the Pro-Am Sports System, PASS. And and Price did some play-by-play for them. I can't imagine him doing play-by-play, but he did. I know, looking at his bio, he actually did some work for ESPN in the very early days of ESPN, when it was I think they still call themselves the Entertainment and Sports Broadcasting Network, and they showed lots of Australian rules football, but that kind of thing. But he really did become, he became known. He became more he said he worked with Frank Beckman, Ernie Harwell, and most famously Dan Dickerson. I think that's where most people, even my age, and of course the younger generations, that's where they really remember Jim Price as broadcasting alongside Dan Dickerson on the radio. And I guess the problem is over the past few years, it's become obvious that Price had lost his fastball. I was telling you before we started recording that I heard a few games that he did with Dickerson. You know, he stopped. Because he was not on the air much this past season. Andy Dirks had been doing almost all the home games, and I believe was it Bobby Scales was doing the road games. Price stopped traveling during the pandemic, and so he wasn't doing a lot of games this year. But when he did, he really sounded slow and off, and he was trying to keep up and was having trouble doing so. And you didn't hear as much of his catchphrases, Yellowhammer, art of pitching, nice area, that kind of stuff. And he was one of those. I think you see that for a lot of broadcasters, Nick. They tend to stay past their due date, if you know what I'm saying. I mean, Jim Price was a welcome voice. He was not a great broadcaster by any means. He was your typical ex-jock turned color guy. But no, he did add something, especially because of his knowledge of the franchise. He literally had been with the franchise since he was a teenager, for the most part. So, but he, like I said, you see this with a lot of broadcasters. They just stay around a little too long, and that what's led to the last couple of years of Price being intermittently on the air and going back off the air, and which causes issues with the broadcast. Now, Dan Dickerson has done, like last year, I think during the pandemic, Dickerson was doing it during games. They were actually bringing in the beat writers.
Oh, really?
Yeah, for parts of the radio broadcasts, as they had no one to, they had no one else. They were the only people traveling with the team at that point.
Wow.
So it was, and obviously you're not going to have an 80-year-old man travel during the pandemic. That was one of my things with. When I brought that up with Greg once, I was not a fan of these aging managers in the middle of a pandemic traveling, which was, I was kind of glad to see Ron Gardenhire, retire when he did, just because, he was having health issues, and look what's happened to like Terry Francona, for example, and all the health issues he's battled and stuff. So I know we're kind of going off on tangents here, but that's just how it is when you have aging men involved in the playing of, the managing of, and the broadcasting of ball games, and they just tend to stay around too long. And in Price's case, I think if he had retired during the pandemic, I think that probably would have been perfect for him. And then the Tigers could have done some auditions and eased some guys in. Instead, he tried to hang around too long, and they're scrambling. I think they found a great guy in Andy Dirks, but he's got another career. Now, I think he was kind of doing this as a side job, and so I don't know where this is going to go. Obviously, during the off season, I'm sure they'll figure out what they want to do with the podcast. He said don't get us going on the TV broadcast, but obviously it's very sad because he was a favorite of the Illiches. He was he had been with the team since he was a baby essentially, and and he really was he was one of those. He was a Detroit guy. He had always been a Detroit guy. He'd been nothing else, and and he was a very, very, very loyal employee to the Tigers, and they treated him just as well. So it was time for him to retire. He should have retired a few years ago, but it's still a very sad situation that it ultimately ended this way, with him finally leaving the air about a month ago and then passing away this week.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That's too bad. Like I said, I don't remember him very much, but it's still sad when something that's like a tradition of a person you associate with your team is gone. So.
Yeah, exactly. It's like with Mario Mpemba and Rod Allen getting fired. That's like, I don't think they were, either one of them were. Mario Mpemba was, I guess, a league average announcer. I didn't think Rod Allen really brought much other than his occasional malaprop or something. But to an entire generation of fans, they're the Tigers. They were the Tigers, and they're still trying to get that all figured out with the TV broadcast since they let them go a few years ago. So now we're going to, at least with the radio broadcast, they're still going to have Dan Dickerson, who is a Hall of Fame quality broadcaster. He is, and what I like about Dickerson is that he has not stayed in the, he's been, I think, behind a behind the mic like 25 or 30 years for them at this point. Probably since it's been since the 90s.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and he has embraced analytics, and he actually talks about it during the game and tries to impart that knowledge to in the broadcast. He's not a stick in the mud. It's only about batting average and RBI and whatever, or whatever. Dickerson has evolved as the game has evolved, and I just hope they give him a partner who's able to play off of that, like Andy Dirks. He would be a great pick. But I believe he's got another full career as a real estate agent, and he's probably making more money doing that than he would doing radio.
Yeah. Huh.
Well, speaking of guys who may have stuck around too long, Miguel Cabrera, that was been one of my hot topics. I said, "Why retire? I'm sure the Phillies will pay you." And I'm going to give a bit of a mea culpa for Miguel Cabrera. Well, sort of. Miggy has hit decently since June, Nick. He's now almost a replacement level player. He's 0.1 negative WAR on Baseball Reference. Okay. But essentially, he's worked himself to be a replacement level designated hitter. But considering what he looked like last year, that's a hell of an accomplishment. He would look bad last year. He had a great June. I think anybody would take if anybody slashed 304, 394. 446, 840 OPS. You would take that from any player in baseball, and that's for vintage Miggy. You call that a bad month, but 41-year-old Miggy, that's a great month. And he's starting to tail off some post All-Star great, but he's still hitting 281 of a 333 on base percentage. He hit a mammoth home run yesterday. I mean,
I heard about that. Yeah.
Yes. I think even he was surprised because that was only his second home run of the year. And it turned out to be an absolute bomb, which is surprising for a guy who was essentially swinging with his upper body because his knees are so bad. And he does have a 708 OPS, which is a big step up from what he's doing. And Nick, at least this version of Miggy is going to finish a Hall of Fame career looking far better than the shell of a player he was the most of last season. I mean, watching him last season was, I guess it was both sad yet anger-inducing that why do you keep running yourself out there when it's one thing to decline, but he didn't decline. He just went off a cliff. And last year was like hitting rock bottom. So I'm kind of surprised that he has bounced back this year to, at the very least, I hate to say this is, I guess this is a compliment. He has not been an embarrassment this year, unlike he was last year.
Yeah, I mean, the last few seasons, I don't think he's had a good season since 2015 or 16, something like that. Like a true Miggy season. Yeah. And then, he's getting older, like as we were talking about, getting older and knees, and it catches up to you. And the more often it happens, the more often it keeps reoccurring. So, I mean, he was injured for the last several years. Yeah, for the most part. Yeah, that's worth noting. His knees are shot. Exactly. And I think his back is an issue too with him. And so last year, I think he started off better than anybody else, but the batting on that team was so bad, that doesn't take much. Yeah, that's right. He had like a good 6 weeks, and then the knee acted up and he was done. And he was on the DL for a while. Yeah. So this year he's overall stayed relatively healthy, and he isn't playing that often, so I think that's helping. Yeah. And I think what they're trying to do is make sure he finishes out the season. Yeah. And not try and kill him on, to drive in runs or something of that sort, so they can celebrate him, is my guess. And because because I just brought up his numbers on Baseball Reference, and you're right, his last Miggy-like year was in 2016. And he was 33 at that point. It feels like he's older than that, but he was 33 in 2016. He had a 956 OPS, 38 home runs, 108 RBI. Finished 9th in the MVP voting. A typical Miggy year. If anything, that's kind of a down year for him. When you look back to what he was, say around 13, 2012. Yeah. When he was up, like he had years where his on base percentage was pushing 450. I mean, that's insane. But then you bring up the numbers. Any year where he played more than 50 games,
His OPS, was 700, and it's been dropping ever since. Till last year, it was just a 622 OPS with a Dick Tracewski-like slugging percentage of 317. That slugging percentage isn't any better, but at least he's hitting the ball he's hitting it where they ain't. He knows what he is now. He's a slap hitter. He's like single essentially, like we called Miguel Ordonez in his last couple of seasons. But I know what, Nick. Thinking back to some of the things I've said on this podcast about Cabrera, how he stuck around so long, and maybe he should have just sucked it up and retired because the Tigers would have paid him. I can understand why a guy like that would refuse. Just because of how much he loves the game of baseball, how much he apparently loves being on the team, and I can understand why he didn't retire, even though it's wrecking his body. That's pretty obvious. But I just want to see him end in a good way. I don't want to see him just don't end the season like last year. I guess that's what I'm saying here. Because saw such a he's the best offensive player I've seen in my lifetime with the Tigers. My lifetime goes back to, the late 60s when I was, like 7 years old. Remember Al Kaline is somewhat in his prime. But, there's been no one even remotely as close to how good he was in that, from about 2010 to 2015 when he was just an unstoppable force. Maybe other than, about the only, how it really felt like prime Miguel Cabrera. Was the closest came to that as a Tigers fan was probably Cecil Fielder in his 50 home run season. It seemed like the entire city would come to a stop when he came to at bat because at that point, the last 50 home run season I think had been George Foster in the 70s. So
that's right.
Cecil Fielder, just pound the baseball into the seats. It was just I just remember. Hold on. Cecil's up. I want to see what he does. And he was probably the last ball player before Cabrera. And obviously Cabrera was just on another stratosphere anyway, where you would stop and want to watch all their at-bats.
Yeah. God, that was I remember that with Fielder. And then in Fielder's case, too, the Tigers stunk. So you had at least one thing to look for.
Exactly.
And, whereas a lot of Cabrera's good seasons on top of that was you were chasing the playoffs.
Yeah.
And it was even more exciting because he had other guys around him for a while. He had, Prince Fielder. He had Gary Sheffield at other times, Ordonez at other times, Victor Martinez, J.D. Martinez. So,
well, I'll go to my grave thinking that 2013 team wins the World Series if he doesn't have that torn up lower body. He could barely move. During the playoffs that year, he was so beat up, and it was obvious that he was not the player he was during the regular season, and but again, that's why I don't get quite so upset about some Tigers fans when it comes to that era of the Tigers not winning a World Series, despite they had 3 Hall of Famers, at least 3 Hall of Famers in Cabrera, Verlander, and Scherzer, and yet. The playoffs are there's such a random things happen in the playoffs. Like Cabrera gets injured, or a pitcher gets hot, or a certain batter gets hot, or there's a bad call. Just remember Don Denkinger, for example. Billy Beane, this is my favorite quote about the playoffs, about baseball playoffs. He once said, the playoffs are a gauntlet of randomness, which means the hardest thing to do is just get to the playoffs. And then at that point, it's just like you throw your hands in the air and just hope for the best.
Yeah. Well, the other part I think might have been Billy Beane's comment was all of this analytics and sabermetrics that are done for players during the season just blows up in a short, 7-game series.
Yeah.
What happens on average over the course of 162 games, you can say, okay, this player should hit about 30 home runs in a year. But even in that 162 games. You take 4 games. How many is it going to hit over any random 4-game series? Maybe
Right.
none.
Yeah.
So you run into a hot team like the Giants at one time, and then the Cardinals the other time.
Right. Oh yeah. Don't get me going on the '87 Twins.
Oh God.
The Tigers those Tigers were without question the best team in baseball that year. But the Twins all of a sudden got stupidly hot, especially in the damn Baggy Dome. I hated that Metro Dome. Oh my God, that place was a dump. And it was everybody knew the Tigers were the better team, but in a 5-game series, that doesn't make a difference. And how many times have we seen that in every pro sport when it comes to the playoffs? The best team doesn't always win.
No, it's the team that's just this. It goes beyond the data, right? It's got like who's got the momentum, who's playing hot, who seems to be all of a sudden playing like they're in another world.
Yeah.
So it's guys you've never heard of all of a sudden, getting hot.
Randy Rosarena, whoever heard of him before? He just absolutely became Willie Mays in his rookie year during the playoffs. I mean, it turned out to be a really good player, but he was a relative unknown during Tampa Bay's first World Series run. And they could not get him out. And that's essentially the playoffs in a nutshell. It only takes one. Bucky Dent. Bucky Dent. And what do they call him in Boston? Fucking Bucky Dent or whatever. Or Bucky fucking Dent. That's it. Bucky fucking Dent. That's we're talking about guys who won. Don Kelly won playoff games for the Tigers, for Christ's sake.
Yeah, I know. Like Don Kelly, of all the players they had on that team, all the hitters, you got your utility infielder or your
leading off and hitting a home run.
Yeah. So,
but that's. But like I said, that's why I don't.
Too.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
The opposite happens too, right?
Yeah.
Because remember 2012 in the World Series, they put Verlander on the mound, the presumptive AL MVP and Cy Young winner, and he got torched.
Yes.
I mean, he got absolutely torched.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The debacle that was pitchers fielding in that World Series. I remember right. Oh my God. That now you're bringing back bad memories. We're not talking about. We're talking good memories about Cabrera, but no. Still, seriously though. That's why. I think I've started to. Maybe now that the end is almost here for Cabrera, he's got maybe 7 weeks left in his career. I know maybe I'm starting to appreciate just what I've seen and how good he was, and just all you got to do is think back to like that at bat against Mariano Rivera in Yankee Stadium, for example. That was one of the wildest things I'd ever seen a Tiger player do. I mean and that was the sort of stuff that Cabrera would do, and and to see him like this is sad, but. If he's happy and the Tigers are happy and the majority of the fans are happy, who am I to shit all over it? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, he was a great player for the Tigers. No question about it. It's
right.
I mean, how far back do you have to go to see someone of comparable caliber player? Long time.
Yeah, specifically a position player. Yeah, you're probably going back to who was a no doubt Hall of Famer. You got to go back to Al Kaline.
Basically, right?
Yeah, exactly. So. And even before realistically, he was still, even before both our times, for the most part. I remember an aging Al Kaline. I don't remember the Al Kaline until they said who was the best outfielder in baseball and things like that. So, yeah.
I mean, I only remember Kaline as with a sidekick with George Kell.
Yes.
On broadcast. That's all I remember.
Yes. So. Yeah, exactly. And there's another guy who was a horrible broadcaster till he wasn't. He had to learn on the job. I mean, he retired and then immediately went into the television booth with George Kell, and which is odd. You had 2 Hall of Fame position players as your broadcast team. Now, that's something you're never going to see anymore.
Yeah, my favorite Al Kaline comment as a broadcaster was the year after George Bell beat out Alan Trammell for MVP.
Oh, yeah.
George Bell got this big, fat contract. And so the Tigers and the Jays were playing one another. Ball gets hit into the outfield towards Bell. And in Al Kaline's eyes, Bell dogged it. And didn't try and really reach for the ball or anything.
Yeah.
And so K-Line says, well, I guess George's money belt was in the way of that one.
Oh gosh! See, and that's he was finally at that point of his career. He was comfortable in the booth and would say things like that. Al Kaline in 1975 or 76 wouldn't say something like that. No, he was a very stiff broadcaster, and but he was a guy also knew when it was time to leave. Going back, kind of talking about Jim Price there. Kaline knew when it was time. I'm done with the traveling. I'm done doing the job, even though. The TV was still a lot different back then because when those guys were on television, you were lucky to see them once a week, maybe twice if you were lucky, and it was usually a Saturday afternoon game. See, we're showing our age here. Before
no kidding.
Before there was where there was a ball game every single day of the week you could watch. It's like that. That's the era of where Ernie Harwell was in many ways became the face of the franchise, because if you wanted to follow the Tigers, you always turned on a radio and there was Ernie Harwell, because more often than not the game was not televised, or or it was sometimes just on locally on Channel 4. It may not have been on in other parts of the state, and it's just amazing how things have changed media wise. Where right now I could turn a game, I could watch any game in the damn world at this point. It seems like especially with MLB.TV. Hell, I can watch the Mud Hens if I want. So it's why would I want to do that? But still, but in the end, I hope Miguel Cabrera continues to enjoy the last 6 or 7 weeks of his career and ends it with a home run or something. I'm done crapping on Miguel Cabrera. It's
same here. And honestly, I'm hoping he goes out like Albert Pujols went out last year. He just went on a tear all of a sudden.
Yes.
You figured, okay, they're going to march him out there for a few at-bats, applaud him.
Yeah.
Give, standing ovations.
And those last 3 months of the year, he was
went nuts.
Vintage Pujols. But again, they used him correctly. He was essentially a situational. I believe they only used him against left-handers and things like that. They used him correctly to where they put him. Pujols was always in the lineup when he was most likely to be successful. Now, and you're right. That's kind of what they're doing with Cabrera now. He's not playing every day. They're picking and choosing who he bats against, and he's. How do you know how many at bats he's getting this year? Because I remember I'd said I do not want to see Miguel Cabrera get 500 at bats, so I am going to check and see where is he stand right now.
I'm curious. There's no way he's going to get 500 this year.
He's 227. So he'll end up with around probably 350, probably. 350. Yeah, he's got 255 plate appearances, 227 at-bats. So perfect. If you're going to use Cabrera, that's, he's a part-time player at this point, playing like a part-timer. Know what shocked me when I just looked at this? Who leads the team in at-bats right now? At-bats. In at-bats? Spencer Torkelson.
He's been healthy all year long, hasn't he?
Yes, he has. He's the only one who has been. He has 500 plate appearances, 443 at bats, and then Javi Baez is at 416. So Torkelson is going to lead the team in most of the counting stats, which I guess is a good segue, don't you think?
Yep.
What to make of Spencer Torkelson? Torque is right now smoking hot. And these numbers are before today, at least the slash numbers. Entering his last 7 games before today, Torkelson was hitting 333 at a 440 on base percentage, 952 slugging, a 1.39 OPS. Today, he hit his 20th and 21st home runs, which makes him the 7th player in franchise history to hit at least 20 home runs in his age 23 season. And he's joined, honestly, a pretty good group of players when you look at this. Hank Greenberg, Willie Horton, Travis Fryman, Matt Noakes, Jason Thompson, and Rudy York. I mean, those are all. Well, Noakes pretty much had that one great year offensively, but the rest of these guys here were pretty darn solid, or solid to Hall of Fame level.
Right.
Hank Greenberg, offensive players, and you have a couple of Hall of very good guys in Travis Fryman and Willie Horton and Rudy York for that matter, and Jason Thompson. Was a very, very good first baseman for this team in the late 70s, early 80s. He was a 30 home run guy. He was pretty much guaranteed for that. Couldn't run a lick. I mean, I saw Jason Thompson hit a ball 440 feet at Tiger Stadium. and got a single. And with Jason Thompson. But still, Torkelson, especially, again, here we go talking about last year. Remember how we're talking how bad Cabrera was? Torkelson was horrible last year. He was one of the worst offensive players in baseball. And right now, he leads the team in home runs at 21 and RBI with 66. And I said he's leading in at-bats, leading in plate appearances. He's leading in a lot of counting stats because, one, he plays every day. He's been remarkably healthy. And he is getting better. But for his position, his OPS is still only 732, and his OPS plus, where 100 is league average, he's still below average at 98. So, and specifically, when you talk about his position, he needs to do more. Right. They say, oh, yeah, he has a chance for 30 home runs and maybe 80 RBI. That is not enough from your first baseman. If if it's not enough from your first baseman if you don't have that kind of production coming from another, like Javi Baez. Javi Baez should be giving you that 25 home run, 90 RBI, 850 OPS production, but it looks like that ship has sailed. So that's when you need your power guys, your corner guys, to really step up their game. And Torkelson has stepped up. I don't think he has stepped up to the point where I'm still sold that he is going to be a cornerstone, middle of the order guy yet. I'll put it that way.
I will say, if I start with last year, I think last year that team was cursed.
Yeah.
I mean, like literally everything went wrong everywhere.
Yeah.
They started off cold is an understatement. Torkelson was terrible. Green started out hurt for the first couple months. Picked it up, and I think he got hurt again. Did he get hurt again? He might have, And Scoop didn't have the year he had the previous year, and they were counting on him. Baez was, what we know of as Baez, and every damn pitcher seemed to go for Tommy John surgery that wasn't already on.
Yeah.
Did already have it.
Yeah, last year, you could probably argue their best offensive player was Eric Haas. And that's
probably.
And that's a scary thought. That's how cursed that team was last year.
Right. So, I mean, Torkelson had a horrid year last year. Maybe he shouldn't have been on the big league club last year.
At least not started the season with the big league club.
Right. Or the other possibility is, and I can't verify this, maybe the new hitter coaches that Scott Harris brought in made a difference, and it took a little time to ramp up and make those changes. And so the year started slow, and now he's picking up. I think it'll be next season before we see whether this is, for real or just momentary.
Yeah,
but I'm happy for him. I'm glad he's hit.
So, and that's the thing with Torkelson. I don't care if he hits 200. If he turns into Dave Kingman, I'm all for that. If he turns into a 3 true outcomes guy, perfect. I could give. That's what gets me is that people say, "Oh, he's only hitting." I think he's hitting. Let's see, what is he hitting right now? Let me bring it up. Yeah, Torkelson's is hitting 228. I don't care if he's hitting 228 if he's going to slug 500. Baseball has changed. I could give a crap about batting. I try not to pay attention that much to batting average. It's all about on base. I mean, just basic analytics. On base percentage and slugging. Those are your two most basic, important analytic things to look at when you talk about a guy's stats. That's why OPS is such a big deal nowadays. But no, so I could give a crap if Torkelson doesn't hit singles. I want him. He's got to hit for power, and he needs to take more walks. I mean, a 3.0 right now he's got a 308 on base percentage for the entire season. That is still too low for the guy who's going to lead the team in plate appearances. Get him to 330. That would put if he improves that on base percentage, he becomes an 800 OPS guy, and then we can go from there. But at the very least, he's hitting for the power we thought he had.
So, I mean, look at it this way, too. He's been improving. Yeah. Even just this year alone. He might have, and his numbers probably reflect a slow start. Yeah. Being ineffective at the plate in the beginning of the year, but now is picking up. And because like what you rattled off kind of, really lifts whatever he was doing at the first part of the season.
Yeah, exactly.
Really lifts those numbers up. So
yeah, exactly. Because
at age 23, if he's improving,
23, yeah.
What more could you ask at this point? And
I guess
I don't even know who the hell they have after him.
Yeah, exactly. But that's the thing that we tend to forget, that he's still young, you know.
Yeah.
And I guess we also have to factor in, I guess this is something, since we all lived through it and suffered through it, the guys like Green and Torkelson literally lost a year of development because of the pandemic. And that's something that I think kind of gets shoved to the side at this point now, you know, because it happened the entire there was no minor league season one year. But yeah, that's going to catch up with these guys, that they lost a year of development, and all of a sudden they want these, at this point, they're like, you know, you're 23, you need to learn how to produce in the big leagues, even though you may have lost a year of minor league development.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering, like, for last year for the Detroit Tigers, I wonder if, you know, some of these guys were thrust into roles that they weren't ready for. Like, I think in 2003, a lot of guys were, you know, like, basically minor league ball players thrust into it into duty on the big league club.
Yeah,
because there was nobody else.
Yeah, Mike
literally nobody else.
Yeah, Mike Baroff was a big league pitcher. He just wasn't your number one starter. He was a number 4 or 5 guy thrust into the number 1 position, and that's what leads to 20 losses. But that says that a pitcher who is not major league caliber is not going to lose 20 games, because he will not be in the big leagues that long.
Right.
You know, so I think that's what people that's a good point to make. That, you know, last year or some of the bad seasons we've seen players put in positions to fail rather than succeed. And last year was a prime example of that.
Well, I think that's also a reason why it's nuts to just go with a complete youth movement, right?
Yeah.
These young guys are going to go through some tough times as they're figuring things out.
Yeah.
And you can't have 8 position players all doing it at roughly the same time. Right. That's crazy. You're going to get a lousy season. You know, I'm surprised they didn't hit futility last year. I mean, their offense was horrid.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, but, you know, I just wonder what Riley Green would look like if he could actually stay healthy between missing half of last year and about 6 weeks of this year. I mean, because right now he is. I know I laughed at him winning Tiger of the Year last year. I mean, he had an OPS of 682 and he was named Tiger of the Year, which, you know, again says volumes about how bad the team was. But this year he's been legitimately their best player. But he obviously had trouble because he had that stress fracture in his leg, and he's had trouble. You know, he missed 6 weeks because he is legitimately developing into the kind of player this team really needs. He looks like an impact bat who is also a plus defender. And it's been a while since we've seen a ball player like that in Detroit.
Yes. I'm hoping it continues. I'm hoping now that when Miguel Cabrera's contract is off the books and some of these other contracts are off the books, I think some of the other guys come off too.
Yeah.
That they pick up a bat.
Yeah.
They try and pick up a bat or two.
Yeah, that's the question as to how. You know, I'm not sure who's available in free agency, but there's not a lot of bats available. Or there's obviously making a trade, but let's not even talk about trades after the debacle that was deadline. But yeah, this team desperately needs another bat. No, or one of the guys in the minor leagues to, you know, maybe it's Colt Keith or I thought it was going to be Austin Meadows. You know, there's a guy right there who is a legitimate big league bat, and it looks like his career might be over. I mean, I would honestly doubt he ever plays for the Tigers again at this point. At least if he does make it back to Major League Baseball, I don't think it's going to be the Tigers. I think the Tigers at this point would just be, we're sorry that how this worked out didn't work out for you, and it's time for each party to move on. But that's the kind of ball player this team really needed, in the middle of the lineup, and he. For obvious for reasons we're not really going to find out. We'll probably never really know why he has the anxiety issues, but that was the kind of bat this team needed. And I was all for that trade. He was a legitimately good
legitimate
hitter.
major league hitter. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. I hate to use the term professional hitter like Randy. Was it like what was that? The old Randy, the GM who brought in Juan Gonzalez.
Smith.
Yeah, Randy Smith. You love the term professional hitter. I don't want to use the term professional hitter, but yeah, Austin Matthews was a legitimately proven Major League Baseball player who at the plate, and it just didn't work out for pretty much reasons out of the Tigers' control. And shockingly, look what happened in Tampa Bay, where they have now a legitimate big league hitting third baseman, and God, I'm getting yes, exactly. So, but I wouldn't. Who saw that coming? But yeah, it's who we're kind of missing in this whole discussion. I think who might end up being a better overall, all around offensive player is oh God, I'm drawing blanks again. What's the matter with me today?
Carpenter?
Yes, thank you. Kerry Carpenter. Carpenter is looking like a legitimate offensive. His slugging percentage is .510. He's hit he leads the team in OPS if he hadn't missed games as well due to injury. But over his career, what are his career numbers at this point here? Yeah, Carpenter's career numbers, and essentially he's got almost 400 at bats as a big league player at this point. Career OPS of 838. He's slugging .500 with an on-base percentage of .335, and he hits .274. And he hits with power, and he's come through in the clutch. And I know clutch is a made-up kind of thing, but he's had some big hits for this team. And he is. I would not be shocked if he becomes the more consistent offensive player than Torkelson.
I'll put a plug in because Greg did an article this week on Kerry Carpenter specifically highlighting that. So, Greg, if you're listening to this, you owe me on that one.
Yeah.
But no, he had an excellent article on there pointing that out. And I've heard even like last year, he's got a legit bat. His one knock is like he can't play defense.
At least not very well. And that's why he missed so much time, because he ran into their damn wall and missed a significant portion of the season. And he's only 24, but that's every once in a while you got to get lucky. He was a 19th round draft pick.
Yes.
And that's what you need to happen. It doesn't happen all the time, but every once in a while you need one of those low round draft picks to step up and prove they're a major league ball player. And looks like they've done that with Kerry Carpenter.
And you could even say, what's the problem of him being a full-time DH at 24, 25 years old?
Yeah.
He can hit, right?
Yeah.
You don't necessarily need to find an old baseball player who doesn't move fast anymore.
Right.
You want a good bat. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the Seattle Mariners have had Edgar Martinez, who was primarily a DH.
For the vast majority of his career. Yes.
Right. And he's in the Hall of Fame.
Right.
So why not? Yeah.
And, and for that matter, it would not bother me at all to see Riley Green move to a corner outfield position. Right. Him diving for balls and running in defenses makes me very, very nervous. And sometimes people mistake making diving catches for good defense, when it might often play maybe more. He got a bad jump, or he took a bad route, or he didn't see the ball right away. And he's going to be, as of things stand, he's tracking to be your best offensive player. And I don't think I want my best offensive player trying to play center field in Comerica National Park, even if they have shrunk it a little bit.
And crashing into the walls, and
yes,
it's going to eventually catch up with him. I mean, he could probably heal fast now, but a few more injuries, and it's not going to heal so fast.
Right, exactly. It's scary. Every time I haven't seen him do it much recently. Austin Jackson was. We said, why does he dive? Well, he doesn't get hurt. He would slide for balls, but he rarely ever dove for balls, and that was probably a big reason why, because that's how you break arms and tear up shoulders and break wrists, and just get yourself nicked up to the point where you miss time. And I'm not too worried about, there's a couple there, like Parker Meadows may end up being the center fielder of the future, and he's at AAA right now. And that way, maybe they can move Green to one of the corner positions. And trust me, I'm still, as much as people love Akil Baddoo, I think he's a fourth or fifth. His ceiling is fourth or fifth outfielder. And he's not a guy you want playing every day because he'll never be able to hit left-handed pitching. But there's nothing wrong with having like a four outfielder platoon, moving guys around, things like that. And it does kind of feel like that's what Scott Harris ultimately wants. And he's kind of like how the NBA seems to be going, where it's kind of positionless. And he's getting a bunch of guys who can play multiple positions, like Vierling, who's playing both outfield and infield, or it's as much as I shit on Eric Haas, he's a catcher and an outfielder, which helps with Baez could play third, short, or second, and maybe they can find a better shortstop and they can hide him at a different position, even though he's still halfway decent defensively right now. But it's like it really looks like the Tigers are going towards, I won't say positionless, but a more versatile lineup rather than throwing the same 8 guys on the field every game. Maybe that's where baseball's heading, because that's where the NBA has already gotten to at this point.
Well, NFL too, right?
Yes.
You hear a lot more conversations about defensive players being able to play multiple positions.
Yes.
Linebacker, or you could be the end. Defensive end.
Look at Abe
those used to be
last year. Got 3 interceptions playing defensive end because he could go off the line and kind of play a bit of kind of have the skills of an outside linebacker and play the ball. But baseball is headed in that direction. It looks like, at least. I mean, you're not going to do that with certain positions like catcher, first base, more than likely. But. I can see, because a lot of the skills that go with like center field also can project to like shortstop, or because I remember when I played ball growing up all through high school, I was a first baseman because I really couldn't play anything else. I was tall and left-handed. Where else are you going to put me? Even though I did play a little bit of outfield, but usually the best athletes on your team ultimately end up playing shortstop or center field. And those are skills, it feels like, that they could become corner outfielders. They could become third baseman. They could become second baseman. They can be those kind of guys that, if they're given the right opportunities, can pretty much play anywhere. And I think that's Scott Harris's dream scenario, is having several players. They can play anywhere in the field, and then they can pick and choose who they play them against and things like that. Then again, I could be wrong, but but that's what it feels like he wants the roster to be.
And that's fine. Like, if you think about it, oftentimes players have been pigeonholed.
Yes.
Ever since I can remember, people were talking about a shortstop should be a little wiry guy and is a light hitter.
Yes.
And I always thought
like that all the way up to the 80s.
And I'm like, why?
Yeah.
Why does he have to be a light hitter?
Yeah.
That's not helping.
Yeah.
So, and then comes Cal Ripken, who's, big lumbering guy. And compared to the skinny little,
Look at Johnny Peralta. He was kind of portly. He didn't have the best range, but what he did get to, he caught. And his offense more than made up to that lack of range. And all of a sudden, today, shortstop is considered a position where you want someone who can hit. And he said when for decades that was not orthodox in baseball. It was, as you said, it was a Ray Euler type, or Eddie Brinkman type, who a guy who great fielders, but they could be blown away by a stiff wind and couldn't hit a lick, and that has completely changed. But now remember how it seemed like catchers could hit back in the day? What happened to catchers that could hit? What happened to the Lance Parises of the world? Baseball seems to go into another direction that way, where with catchers, now they've gone kind of the other direction, where it feels like they want guys who can pitch frame, guys who can have an arm, guys who can handle the pitching staff, and offense takes maybe like there's like third or fourth or fifth down the line of the skill they want from that guy. I mean, look at Jake Rogers. His only offensive skill is he's got power, but he's such a good defensive backstop. Is that he's going to be on this team at the very worst, he'll be a backup catcher for a long time. But with that power, you know, he as what Jim Leyland would say, he's going to run into one every few games. You know, and you know, a catcher of 21 home run power, that's great. You know, even if he only gives you a 650 OPS, because he's still a plus player because of his defense. Defense and power. I see. You know, it really comes down to it. Feels like, you know, it's not so much about speed because the stolen base has essentially been taken away from the game. Small ball is out of the game for the most part. It's all about defensive power right now. You want guys who can catch the ball, and you want guys to hit over the fence. And if you got a team full of those, you're going to win a lot of games.
Well, I think that's part of the de-emphasizing batting average, right?
What's that? I'm sorry?
That's what you get for de-emphasizing batting average. You know, it's not just getting on base, but I will. What I've noticed is guys will still hit a lot of home runs. Yeah. But very few RBIs. Yeah. Like, you could hit 40 home runs, but you have like 80, 90 RBIs, whereas you should be having like 120 RBIs, which tells me there's nobody on base for them to drive in.
Exactly. Yeah.
So there's a lot of solo home runs, but I wish there was a little more hitting for average going on.
Yeah. It'd be nice if we could find a happy median. You know, it's like we've gone from where batting average is the be-all, end-all, even if they were a 300 hitter with a 300 on-base percentage. You know, he was a great player. That's changed. But now we've kind of almost flipped it to 180, where you know, a guy hits 190, but if he gives you 40 bombs, it's great. You know, you think there'd be a happy medium where the guy's going to hit 280 and give you 30 home runs, you know, and, it's just, but again, it's analytics, and who knows where baseball's going to go next. I mean, I never thought they would outlaw the shift, for example, you know, so, you know, or the Manfred man, you know, I'm still getting used to that, even though I don't miss those 17, 18 inning long games, but especially on the West Coast. But no, I'm sorry, no offense to the West Coast guy here. But baseball has changed so much that it's oftentimes unrecognizable to the game I grew up watching. Where and I mean, I could care less if I ever see a bunt again. I think one of the smartest things people have discovered in baseball is the most valuable thing you have is your outs, and to give up one of them is a very, very bad decision. So, but 30, like when I grew up playing ball, I was, here I am, in high school, I'm 6'5", 200 pounds, and they had me practicing bunting, because that's what you did. Everybody had to know how to bunt, even though I was never going to bunt. But that's the sort of thing that kind of ship has sailed completely. It's a completely different ballgame.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the other thing that's happening now is just guys are swinging for the fences. So
yes.
If every out or avoidance of an out is precious. Yeah. I mean, a strikeout is a guy single-handedly making an out. And killing rallies instead of driving the ball. And doesn't it? I mean, sure, a big guy is not going to bunt and run out. The first before he gets thrown out. But, the other guy, there's guys that are really small and really fast.
Yeah, right.
So,
but no, it's funny. I was even taught to choke up. I mean, and I'm not talking like choking up like Ty Cobb, where there was like 6 inches of the bat from the knob, but I would move up, maybe an inch or two, if I had 2 strikes on me, because that's what I was told to do. Shorten your swing, get your bat on the ball, put it in play, avoid the strikeout, because strikeouts were like the worst everything you could do on the ball field. And that I think is the biggest change of all in baseball is people don't care about strikeouts anymore. They don't care if you whiff 200 times a year, and back in the day, that was the absolute worst thing you could do was striking out. And, now I think they think the worst thing you can do is hit a ground ball. It really is. Don't hit a ground ball. That's the worst thing you can do because too many bad things can happen. Like you need to do a double play or something. So, but yeah, that's I think the biggest thing.
But I think with that apathy towards strikeouts, you get a lot of really boring baseball in a way.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I said, if your team is trying to catch up, tie the score, or go ahead, and strikeouts are common, it's like a guy can kill a rally.
Yeah.
Or take Baez, for instance. That guy flails away at everything.
Yes, that becomes very frustrating watching him play. Watching him swing that bat. Oh my God.
So I'd rather him knock it into play. Maybe something dumb can happen there. There could be an error. There could be a base hit. It could go between Bill Buckner's legs, kind of thing.
That's the thing. I could understand. A Dave Kingman striking out 200 times a year because that was his job, was to hit home runs. Why is Javi Baez striking out like Dave Kingman? That's that's the thing that gets me. He should not be that 170 strikeout a year kind of guy. Yet, here we are in today's game, and that's what's become so frustrating because there is there's. I know we're kind of going off on a whole bunch of tangents here, but I guess that's our old school baseball watching and how much the game has changed and how some things that were absolutely taboo back in the day are now completely accepted. And that leaves you of Javi Baez striking out, going for a golden sombrero by flailing at outside sliders.
I kind of joke sometimes that if Rob Deere had played today, he'd be on top of the world.
God, yes, he would be. Him and Mickey Tettleton.
Yeah.
Oh my God, yes, they were three true outcome guys. They're either going to homer, walk, or strike out. Especially Rob Deere.
Yeah, I mean, his best look was his bat was over here and his head was like looking at the ball in a catcher's mitt. But no, nowadays a 220 average or 210 and 30 some home runs. That's guys' numbers today.
Yeah,
and that's not a bad thing these days.
Yeah, I just looked up Rob Deere, his best year in Detroit, because he wasn't in Detroit that long. He's only here like 2.5 seasons. But the 1 year he played, he was he hit 179. Actually, that was maybe one of his worst years. Was he hit 179 of 175 strikeouts, and but he hit 25 home runs. But then the following year, he actually had one of his best seasons, where he hit 32 home runs and actually hit 247, and he had an 884 OPS. Yeah, and that's exactly what it was, because his on base percentage shot up that year because he walked more. But that was exactly those early '90s Tigers were ahead of their time. They really were.
Yes,
they really, really were. They had guys like Tettleton, Deere, Fielder. Lou Whitaker had essentially at that point, it started to sell out and be a straight pull hitter at that point of his career. Tony Phillips, who was a positionless player, you could play him anywhere in the field. If that team even had a smidgen of pitching, they would have. They could have sniffed the playoffs instead of being like what the '92 Tigers, 75 and 87, because they absolutely had no pitching. When Bill Gullickson's your ace, you're gonna win 75 games. And then I just looked it up. Frank Tanana was still pitching at that point.
Was he really?
Yes, he was. He was their number 2 starter. He actually won 13 games that year. But then I'm looking at some of these names that were on the pitching staff. Remember Eric King, Scott Aldred, Mike Henneman was a legit solid closer. But after that, they had I see a bunch of names I don't even vaguely remember. Oh, John Doherty, I kind of remember, but Les Lancaster, Kurt Knudsen, Mike Munoz. Good Lord. That was bad pitching staff. I mean, when your number 4 starter is Scott Aldred. Oh my God. Yeah, and yet as a team, let's see, let me bring it up here. How many home runs did they hit as a team? 182 home runs. And honestly, No, that was a lot, especially going back for that era. So. But yeah, those teams had pitching, but we're going way off track here at this point. We need to
just
get
a little
back,
bit, yeah.
We need to get back on the rails here. So,
Okay.
I think we about run the Tigers into the ground at this point. So I guess the other big news the last couple of days here, though, was Steve Yzerman out of nowhere in the dog days of the offseason in the NHL made a surprising trade. He acquired Jeff Petry. And yes, Jeff Petry is the son of longtime Tiger pitcher and current Bally Sports analyst Dan Petry. And actually, Jeff Petry has been a good defenseman for a very long time in NHL. I believe he spent the majority of his career with the Canadiens. But yesterday, he was acquired from the Canadiens in exchange for Gustav Lindstrom. Yes, they got a Lindstrom, but not the one we all remember. Essentially, Lindstrom is like he's a guy who's going to be scratched most nights. He's a deaf guy more than anything else. He's young, but he's a deaf guy. And a 4th-round draft pick in 2025 in exchange. And also, the Canadiens kept 50% of his contract, which runs through next season. It's a 2-year deal. So all of a sudden, you have a legitimate top 4, top 6 defenseman, and you get with a minuscule cap hit for the most part of around $2.5 million, because the Penguins also still have holding on to that. It's like 2 other teams are holding on to salary, and the Wings are getting the most use out of this. So the cap hit for the Wings is only a little over $2 million on a $6.5 million contract. So they get themselves a 35. He is old. He's 34, 35 at this point, I should say. But he's a right-handed shot. Wings need. He's very good. He's always been very good in the power play, and he will slot into the everyday lineup. He may not be a top pairing, but he'll definitely go into the second or third pairing. And I mean, I see absolutely no downside to this trade. Even if Petry isn't the player he used to be, and he was at one point a very good very good everyday defense, but a top pairing guy. He's not that now. He's the fact that he's coming home. I guess he still lives in Michigan. In the off season. In fact, his family's here, his dad's here, whatever. He has history here. I believe he said he grew up in Farmington Hills, and the fact that that you're getting a legitimate NHL defenseman for a minuscule salary cap hit. This is like, what the hell is Yzerman doing to these other general managers to be able to pull this stuff off?
I'm kind of saying, I look at Yzerman, he's in a rebuilding mode with his team.
Yeah.
And I looked at the Tigers, they're in a rebuilding mode with their team. I know Illich said the rebuild is over last year, but let's, whatever you want to call this team. There's they're betting on a bunch of young guys trying to carry this team, be competitive. And I kind of like what Yzerman's doing. He's trying to build through the draft.
Right.
But he's also trying to field as competitive of a team as he can possibly put out on the ice.
Yeah, right.
Whereas I didn't think the Tigers did. And so I'd be like, they're all worried about the farm system and all this other stuff.
Scott Harris. We all knew Scott Harris needed a third baseman. He never got one.
He needs offense, and he picked up
plugging holes with legitimate players.
Right. Last year, he needed offense for this year's team because they were horrid, historically bad. And so, who did they pick up? Matt Boyd.
Yeah.
For Christ's sake, right? And
and then Yzerman, they need offense. What do they do? They get the Brinkat, a 40-goal guy.
And they bring other guys in. Yeah. And a lot of these guys, a couple of these guys he gave long-term contracts to. They're 5 years, and I forget what's his name. He gave one guy a 5-year contract.
I think Sherrod is the one most people complain about, Ben Sherrod.
Okay. No, this year he gave another guy. Is it Stomfer?
Yeah, I think I know. A player similar to Sherrod, essentially.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then another guy they gave a 4-year contract, but other guys he gave 1-year contracts to.
Right.
He's got Petry, who's 35 years old. So how much longer is he going to play?
Yeah.
He's got him on 2 years.
2 years.
On a team-friendly contract.
Right. In a place he probably wants to play.
Why not close out your career close to home?
And I guess the other thing that always comes to mind, that Wings kind of have a history with getting a great production out of aging defensemen who people thought were washed up. I think, Chelios, Murphy, Rafalski, for example. Pete, and Petry, even though his numbers have declined somewhat, he's still, a kind of a guy that I think he would be great to pair with one of the young defensemen. A veteran who knows all the damn tricks. And that's the kind, as you said, you can't have, that's what, like with the Pistons, people say, why don't you just play all the kids? Because you can't play all the kids, because then you would lose every damn game because they don't know what the hell they're doing yet. Exactly. And that's what Yzerman's doing with this team. That he's got a young core that he hopefully be able to build around. And as you said, the minor league system is really starting to be built up, and they have a lot of draft capital. But you need guys like a Jeff Petry on your team or a Ben Sherratt or a DeBrincat, guys like this, to show these guys this is what it takes to remain in the NHL and to be an everyday hockey player. And so there is no downside to this, if you ask me.
Right. I mean, as long as he stays healthy, he can be on the ice. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you remember the last 2 seasons around springtime, the Pistons the Red Wings ran out of gas. I mean, They were getting hammered. And we talked about this with Ken Calla a little bit last time is, towards the end of the season, they were giving up a touchdown. That's how many points they were giving up. Repeatedly 6, 7, 8 goals a game. And it's not only the goalie that's responsible for something like that, especially night after night. Your defense is not keeping up.
Right.
And are they burning out? Are they tired? What is it that's going on there? And bringing in a defenseman who's played, over a decade, full seasons, knowing how to play defense, is a benefit to them.
Right, exactly. And the player you were thinking of was JT Compher. There's a guy they brought in. Yeah. And the player I was thinking of that he's almost like a clone of is Andrew Kopp, who had an off season last year. But again, you keep bringing, you're not going to hit home runs in every move, but you're also not going to strike out on every move.
Right.
And, a lot, and I guess that's the other thing is that Yzerman is actually, I think he's telling some of these young players, you have to earn your spot. And if you're good enough to earn that's the other thing I kind of like about his philosophy is, if one of these young guys, one of the young, especially the young defensemen in Grand Rapids steps up their game and makes the team, well, great. Now you got a trade asset, one of the veterans. You got someone you might be able to get something back or get, and get yourself more draft capital or salary cap space or something. I've had some I've had a couple of thoughts. What's Yzerman doing here? But when you see some of these, a move like getting Jeff Petry, who is a legitimate defenseman on a team that needs legitimate talent, it's like, okay, I can see what he's trying to do here, and I think you put it best. They're not going to tank. That's pretty obvious. As much as I hate tanking anyway, but it's obvious that they may not have a playoff caliber team, but I think he thinks this should be a team that, at the very least, should be in the hunt for a playoff spot if some of these guys step up. And if you're in the hunt, you need guys like a Jeff Petry or a Compher or a Sherratt or whatever, or a DeBrincat. You need veterans who have been in that experience before, because think about it. When one of your best players, who you've just given a long extension to, and Dylan Larkin, I mean, what's his playoff experience?
I think he had one his rookie year,
I believe. Yeah, his first year. So you need guys with playoff experience in the NHL, especially.
Well, that's the other part too. Like, it doesn't matter if we're considered a rebuilding team. You're earning your playing time, period. You're going to go out there and compete. And I think that message is really clear.
Yeah.
I think I got into it with people and with going back to the Tigers and Torkelson. It's like, no, you don't give him first base and that's his to, make him earn it.
Yeah.
And if he's not hitting well.
Yeah, and they handed him the position last year and he couldn't handle it.
Yeah. And versus, okay, you're going to earn that position. The problem becomes too is if you got nobody better.
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't know if the Tigers had anybody better, but you don't get the message. Okay, rookie, that's yours.
Yeah, exactly. And what's worth noting, despite all this contract maneuvering and free agent signings and trades, the Wings still have $6 million in salary cap room, which absolutely stunned me, considering some of the long. They gave a long extension to Larkin. They gave like Larkin. 4 years to DeBrincat. As you said, they signed a bunch of veterans to deals from anywhere from 1 to 4 or 5 years, and yet they still have $6 million in salary cap space at this point, which still allows them a lot of maneuverability when it comes to making trades and things like that. So it's God, I don't know how Yzerman does it. Now the next step is let's make the playoffs and go from there. And that's got to be the next step with this team. They've been rebuilding for. I got to say, I made fun of when Ken Howland said a rebuild could take 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
I'm learning he wasn't wrong.
No, he wasn't.
Yes.
You want to try. Hopefully, if Yzerman nurtures the minor league system, they don't have to go into one of these long rebuilds. I mean, that's the one thing about having a good minor league farm system is, you'll have players coming in fresh. I mean, that's what it dried up for the Wings.
Yeah. And remember the last batch that they thought were going to be of the next group, all for the most part washed out.
Yes.
So much like we've seen with a lot of, like the Tigers have had a few. Last Tigers youth movement essentially all completely flamed out. About all that's left of it right now, at least the position players, is Jake Rogers. Pretty much every other position player of that era has been traded, released. Where's Kristen Stewart nowadays? 2-time Tiger minor leaguer of the year. I couldn't even tell you if he's in baseball at this point. So
Jacoby Jones.
Yeah. Oh God, this forced Jacoby Jones down this team's throat. No, even though he was not a big league ball player, he showed flat. He was the poster boy for an athlete, not a baseball player. He just didn't have all the skills. And hopefully Yzerman doesn't have. I think it's pretty obvious Yzerman hasn't fallen into that trap because he has still been very proactive in building the farm system and trying to keep that that flow of talent coming up. But he's also got enough veterans there to say, you're not getting a free ride, i.e. Spencer Torkelson either. So
yes.
So it's I just want to see more NHL talent. I want to see this team play some important hockey, which hasn't happened in such a long time. I mean, especially after what we saw, they're in the wild card slot, and then Ottawa blows them out twice, and the season's over. I mean, let's at least go a little deeper next year. So
yes, yeah,
exactly. All right, Detroit Lions. Neither one of us watched the exhibition game, and I'll probably watch the next one because I will be home. At least I think because I'm going home. Yeah, I'll be home this week. I'm going back up to the cabin for a few days next week for more work. But there has been a couple things going on with the Lions that are worth checking out. They finally got a backup quarterback. I think the first legitimate backup quarterback who could actually win you a game since probably Sean Hill was backing up Stafford back in Stafford's early days. And that is they signed Teddy Bridgewater.
Yep.
And that was definitely a glaring weakness. I mean, when you're dependent on Nate Sudfeld, because actually Hendon Hooker is not going to be ready to start the season. He's obviously a guy they're stowing for next year, their third round pick. So we're still recovering from an ACL. So all they have, I think, for the most part, was right now, Nate Sudfeld and Adrian Martinez, the guy I think he played at Nebraska for like 10 years. At least that's what it felt like. So then I think he finished his career at Kansas State, if I remember it. Anyway, but they really didn't have a legitimate NFL guy back there. Now they do. They have a guy who can win games if Goff, God forbid, Jared Goff gets hurt. And here I am 2 years after that trade saying, God forbid Jared Goff gets hurt. That's how important he's become to this team. But Bridgewater, 8-year vet, going into his 9th season. He has started 65 games. I think he's won like 33. So no, he is not a used to be, so to speak. He's still a guy who can go in and play. And he's been on 5 different teams. He's bounced around the league a little bit. I remember his days at the Vikings where I think they thought he was really going to be something. Then he had a horrific knee injury, and that kind of changed the direction to the direction of his career to now where he is a highly thought of backup. But Yeah, this is the one. This is it's kind of silly that one of the biggest controversies on this team is who's going to back up Jared Goff, which kind of tells you how the talent level on the Lions has risen to the point where people are concerned about the backup quarterback of all people. But at the very least, people knew they could not go if they had any hopes of making the playoffs. They had to have a legitimate backup quarterback. You can't go with Nate Sudfeld as your backup. So this signing makes perfect sense. And you got Bridgewater saying all the right things. No, he's here to be a support guy. He's here to be a locker room leader. He's here to show Jameson Williams what it is to be an NFL player, so on and so forth. So it sounds like he's going to fit right into the Lions locker room culture, which is a big deal to them.
Right. I think it's, in my opinion, I don't know if it's the first or the second most important thing that they have to figure out. And it's, for me, it's between that and place kicker.
Yeah, we're still not sure about that yet.
Yeah, and I'm glad they're taking it seriously and looking at guys and not just sticking with the guy they had last year, because he was okay, but he could not do the 50-yarder.
Yeah,
as far as I know. And but it was smart for them to beef up that, what do you call it? The backup quarterback position, isn't it? They were fortunate enough to sign Bridgewater. I think he will be good. He was actually a Pro Bowler, I think, one year with the Vikings.
Yeah, I wouldn't surprise. Yeah, you're probably right. He was not he's not a bad ball player.
No, not at all. And you're right. No knock on Nate Sudfeld. He just has no game experience.
Yeah.
So, and if Goff goes and it's like a fall off a cliff. I mean, you remember those days where I think it was Stafford and then who was it? Boyle and somebody
Tim Boyle, yeah. Oh God, yes, yeah.
And then somebody else, I forget who else was after that, because they knocked two of those guys out and we're playing with the third stringer, and it's like, who the hell is this?
Yeah, exactly.
So definitely they need some, like insurance in case Goff goes down, because he could easily get hurt.
Yeah. Even though the Lions should have one of the best offensive lines in the game next year, one bad hit, one roll, a guy rolls up or something.
It could be his player running into him. It could be something stupid at practice. It could be anything.
Yeah, it could be even hitting his hand on a player on an offensive lineman's helmet, throwing the ball. Shit happens in the NFL, and the fact that the Lions have gotten full seasons out of Jared Goff seems more. I don't want it, maybe not luck, but yeah, it's kind of lucky. Look at how often Stafford got hurt, and that was one of the things that always bugged me about Stafford, is that since they very rarely had a legitimate backup behind him, he felt like he had to play through injuries that probably made him a far less effective quarterback, especially the hand and finger injuries he'd suffer. Then you see them. And I remember the article. Oh, God, can Stafford throw with a glove on his hand? Well, apparently not, because the Lions had some seasons fall apart that way. So I'm glad to see they actually have invested in the backup quarterback. And you're right about place kicking. It's something that I hope they get it settled and pick the right guy, because we've been spoiled the majority of our lives. I mean, I'm old enough to remember Errol Mann, who was the last of the straight ahead kickers the Lions had back in the 70s, and he sucked. At least he was okay for, it was a different game. If they made 50% of their kicks, they were having a good year back then. But ever since Eddie Murray showed up in the late, around 79 or 80, we've as fans, we've been blessed with elite kicking between Murray and then Hansen and then Prater.
Right.
And now it feels like we're kind of lost in the wilderness when it comes to the place kicking.
I know. That's like, out of all the things you never worried about with the Lions.
Exactly.
Plenty that was absolute disasters. You didn't worry about their place kicker.
Yeah, right now I guess they say it's Riley Patterson and John Parker Romo are in camp right now. Who the hell is John Parker Romo?
I have never heard of him.
Yeah.
I think Patterson they brought back because he was on the team at least.
Yeah, it's
a short time.
Yeah. He was he kicked with Jacksonville last year,
Okay.
but he was with Detroit the year before. So they brought him back, and that's the thing that the Lions feel like they have been playing. They've been playing with fire with the place kicking ever since they decided they didn't want to pay Matt Prater.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and if there's one thing that doesn't bother me too much, at least as Lions fans, pay the money and have yourself a very good place kicker, because they are really worth their money. They really are. I mean, ask the Ravens how they feel about Justin Tucker. Yeah. So once you have your hands on a great kicker, you keep them. So it kind of bothered me when the Lions decided to just let Prater walk away. Even though Prater had a bit of an off season for him, the guy still has a damn bazooka for a leg. And it always felt like if you get in 60, you have a chance. Guys like Patterson is like, well, if they get to 40, they have a chance. But yeah,
that's right. That's right. So,
but yeah, it's at the very least now. That's at least one position I don't think the Lions have to worry about. They got the backup quarterback settled. Something happens to Goff, Bridgewater is more than capable of being the bridge guy till he's able to play again. Hopefully, we don't even get to that point. That's fingers crossed. Goff plays as well as he can, but I guess it can always change. That's the other thing. Say Goff regresses, Bridgewater has proven he can play. You have options now. I guess that's the best way to put it.
Yes.
All right. One other kind of, I won't call it maybe it is a controversy is, I had this on the notes for our last podcast, and we never got around to it, but it's kind of gotten even worse since then, and that is Jameson Williams, the new fan scapegoat, because it seems like every team in town has had a scapegoat at one time or another. Like the Tigers, remember it was Brandon Inge for years. The Pistons, it was Andre Drummond. For wings, it's the goaltender usually. So so it's going back to like Cujo and things like that. So, but Rogie Vachon, that kind of thing. But with the Lions, for a lot, remember the Eric Ebron. Everybody hated Eric Ebron. The old tight end who ended up. I think I didn't remember they traded him or waived him. Whatever it was, he ended up going to Baltimore, I believe. No, going to Indianapolis. That's what it was. Anyway, the Lions fan base always seem to have a player. They aim their ire, and the latest is maybe Jameson Williams. And this is the prime example of that, Nick. When I got back from up north, as I said at the beginning of the show, I didn't pay that close of attention to what was going on. I knew the headlines, but I wasn't going into depth of anything. So the first thing I do when I get home and I get settled in and get out of the shower, I decide, I'm going to turn on 97.1 the ticket. Now, this is during the afternoon show, and the afternoon show is known to be a bit more reactionary than most. And as soon as I turn the radio on, the first thing you hear is a caller saying, "We've reached a crisis mode with Jameson Williams." Crisis mode? After one exhibition game? And it's, I think there's a lot of overreaction going on here, but Jameson Williams hasn't really helped himself either, because he was pretty much non-existent after coming back from injury last year. He had like 2 big plays, and that was it. He missed the first half of the year, and I think he came back after he was in the last 6-7 games, something like that, and really didn't do much. But his social media activity has been, at least to the fans, I won't say for him or to his teammates, it's been problematic. Yeah, I remember here in Detroit, there's a big kerfuffle on that same station again over Jameson Williams lighting fireworks at 1 o'clock in the morning. And a couple of the hosts were clutching their pearls, thinking of, what about the neighbors? What if he blows his fingers off? Blah, blah, blah. And it's like, this is what you're talking about? Well, this is why they're talking about it, because otherwise they had to talk about the Tigers. And who wants to do that? Obviously, then there's also the 6-game suspension for gambling. Thank God it wasn't on the Lions themselves, but he was suspended. But he was gambling on team premises, which also goes for hotels and so on and so forth. And then reports out of training camp have been mixed when it comes to Williams. Some drop balls, a couple of fights. And then in the first exhibition game, I didn't watch it. I'm just going by reports. He had a drop pass, and he ran the wrong route on a play that led to a Nate Sudfeld INT. Even though I did read that the beat writer said, well, it was a bad pass regardless, so it's not all on Williams. But it really feels like there's a lot of overreacting going on here, and I'm not really sure if it's because of Williams' personality, if it's because the fan base has to focus on something bad, or what, or I'm really not sure what it is. Because I'm not worried about this kid, yet. Even though I think what is not helping is sports talk radio, because they have nothing else to talk about right now other than Lions training camp, and the easiest thing to focus on is a wide receiver who has had some issues in his past.
Well, let's take a few of these
Yeah.
at a time. Number one, he's 22 years old.
Yep.
Okay, he's a 22-year-old kid. Is he going to do some and say some like dumb things on social media? I haven't followed him on social media, so I don't know. But
neither have I. But apparently he has. But
surprise.
What would have happened if you were on social media at age 22? I know I would have probably said some goddamn things I regret.
Of course, and let's not take that too seriously.
Right.
That is as much ado about nothing as possible.
Right. Mm-hmm.
As far as his performance last year, he's showed some speed.
Yep.
He's had a couple pretty nice touchdowns.
Yep. Yep.
Did he play much? Was that deliberate not to play him too much?
Mm-hmm.
Possibly.
Yeah.
I mean, he comes in middle of the season after having had a pretty bad injury.
Right.
Right? A bad knee injury, if I remember. And his presence is not make or break for them.
Right.
So don't kill him in his rookie season. Get him some reps. And I'm guessing, I thought that's what the Lions were doing.
Yeah.
That was my impression.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't, and he was a rookie.
Yeah.
He's going to make mistakes. This year in a gambling thing, that whole thing is stupid. That's a whole nother can of worms.
Yeah, that's a whole nother discussion that would really, it's problematic, but it's problematic on the NFL's part.
I agree. Yeah. Totally agree. And so a 22-year-old kid has a lot of money, has a phone with an app on it, and he can make a bet on a college game.
Yeah.
All right. So.
Yeah, he probably wanted to place a bet on his own Alabama team. Big deal.
Right. And okay, who cares?
Yeah.
What do I care about that?
Mm-hmm.
I have other feelings about just the gambling with the online gambling with the sports, but totally different animal.
Yeah.
But a 6-game suspension sounds like he made some sort of I don't know, like some serious mistakes. What's his name got not that many more games for punching out his girlfriend
exactly.
Video, remember?
Exactly. Yeah.
And did he get 8 games or something like that?
Yeah, after there was an or if you want to go back to Ray Rice, he got 2 games for punching out his girlfriend until it turned up on video, and then social media lost her mind. And he goes, maybe now we should suspend him longer. That's the one thing I think with the league brass in every sport. They tend to be more reactionary than anything else. And
exactly.
And oftentimes they err on the side of they err too far on the side of caution when, especially they can do whatever the hell they want because they're not the government, they're not a court, they're not a judge. Essentially, guys like Roger Goodell, Adam Silver, Rob Manfred, they're judge, jury, and executioner. So and oftentimes also is that the length of suspension sometimes is dictated by what it says in the collective bargaining agreement. So, But that's another thing. If the collective bargaining agreement says, spousal abuse gets you 2 games, well, that needs to change, But the gambling stuff, I'm with you there. It's not that, as long as you aren't betting on your own sport, you're not betting on the NFL. I don't have live your life. In other words, as long as you're not hurting yourself personally and hurting your team and your teammates, what's the big deal? So no, I'm complete. And the NFL's policy has been, it's the hypocrisy more than anything else. It's the don't bet on games, but make sure you fans go to FanDuel and bet on games.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not like they're not advertising the hell out of DraftKings and FanDuels.
Yep, exactly.
Everywhere you turn. I mean, I was watching a lot of Pistons games, and those logos were littered all over the place.
Yeah.
So,
it's something. I know that is. I enjoy gambling on. I have I think 3 of them. I have FanDuel, DraftKings, and BetMGM. And I'm actually up on all of them, but I'm not a degenerate gambler. I'd like to pick and choose where I make my bets, and oftentimes they are so desperate to get the action from you, they will give you free bets. Or they'll give you profit boosts. Like, now again, going off on a tangent. Yesterday, on yesterday's game, I get an email from I think it was DraftKings saying, you get a 50% profit boost on any MLB bet. Oh, okay. Now I have like a and a lot of these apps, I'm still working. It was all free money because they gave you money to sign up back when they went live in Michigan 2 years ago. So I have I've worked it up to about $100 on DraftKings. So, okay, what's an easy bet that I like my odds and I can get a nice boost? And so my bet was, and it was a prop bet. What's the over/under on runs scored in the first inning of the Tigers-Twins game? I took the under of 0.5. In other words, I'm betting they're not going to score. So I put $5 on it, got the profit boost. Nobody scored, and I won $12. Money, out of no, So that's the kind of stuff I like to do. And I like to pick and choose and bet smart. And that's, I think, the fear with the NFL and some of these teams, that they got guys with mega amounts of money who aren't betting smart and who could ultimately be influenced by. Well, there is that incident with the college baseball where I think it was Alabama's coach. I forgot.
Oh yeah.
Yes, who gave one of his friends a tip that he wasn't going to be starting a certain pitcher, and this guy pretty much tried to grab up every bit of money he had and try to place a damn bet. And the sportsbook's like, no one places that kind of money in college baseball, which eventually wrote the red flag, and next thing you know, people are getting fired over it. So, again, that is the hypocrisy. All of these leagues and college leagues and stuff are promoting this stuff, yet they're telling the players not to. Regardless of all that, Jameson Williams, it's way too early to get a panic mode about it. That's what gets me. And I think the worst offender is, once again, local sports talk radio, and that probably goes for every damn team in the country right now. The worst offenders when it comes to stirring up shit about non-existent or trying to make a mountain out of a molehill is sports talk radio. And oftentimes the worst offenders are the drive time shows on local sports talk. And I know the one here in Detroit is really bad about that.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, he's entering his first full season. He might not have had a great preseason game. What? I mean, how many reps has this kid had at all? And he's playing with the second string quarterback who hasn't had many reps himself.
Right, exactly. And who will likely never see the field this year now. So yeah, exactly.
Exactly. And if you're going to make your mistakes, make it during, you're going to make the team. Yeah. It's not as though he's on the bubble.
Right.
Of getting cut.
Yeah, just put in the work.
Make your mistakes now. Who cares? It's preseason.
Yeah. And that was the other thing. I guess he might have heard it was reported his hamstring today. I'm like, well, it's at least a 6-week injury because that's how long his suspension is going to be anyway. So, it's like, and that's the other thing is that I think this team is hopefully, I think from all accounts, going to be deep enough that they can still be a very good offense without Jameson Williams for half the season, or it ever takes some time to ease him in. If Jameson Williams is you're going to blame Jameson Williams for losing games, and you have a bad team anyway. That's really what it comes down to.
Yes, and I don't think they're in that position. I mean, they had a solid offense last year. Yeah. Without having him on the.
Yeah, for the most part, yeah.
On
like
the field,
they had a very good offense last year, and he barely played. So if they have the same offense this year, and it's the same way, I'm not gonna lose sleep over it. Exactly.
No. Yeah. He's just going to add to. If he turns out to be good, he's just basically adding to already a good offense.
Yeah. Yeah, I think what also kind of plays into this is the fans' history with first-round wide receivers who ended up being bust. Going back to Charles Rogers and Big Mike Williams, or Matt Millen taking a wide receiver in the first round 3 straight years, and only one of them actually turned out to be halfway decent. That was Roy Williams, if I remember right.
Well, so
Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah, and taking Ebron over Aaron, the tackle of the Rams. So, you know who I'm talking. Aaron Donald. Yes, who was going to be a Hall of Famer. So, yeah, I think that it could play into this. There's a lot of the fans have been burned so many times in the past. They need someone else to focus on when it comes.
Oh, you forget the other one.
Yeah.
You can't forget Titus Young.
Oh, yeah, and that's another whole can of worms when it comes to mental health and everything else.
Yeah,
it turned out he was mentally ill.
Yeah. So.
Oh, God! See, now we're rehashing bad Lions history. We're trying to get rid of that same old Lions, I think. I hope. But anyway, all right. With that, let's hit the home stretch here. Let's wrap this thing up. The last podcast, Nick, we talked a little bit about the Pac-12. And Colorado had bailed, and they were going to the Big 12, and there was a lot of questions of what was going to happen to the Pac-12. And my opinion was it's dead, or it's going to be dead. Well, as I put in the notes, for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for the Pac-12. As of today, the Pac-12 won't survive past this season the way it looks. Apparently, it was all after Colorado bailed. It was really came down to what kind of a TV contract the Pac-12 could get to keep schools from splintering. And apparently, the contract offer they got was a subscription TV contract from Apple TV Plus. Which was, and from all accounts, it was not going to be you subscribe to Apple TV, you get to watch the games. It was you paid to subscribe to Apple TV, and then you pay again to get the Pac-12 package. And you think that was not going to fly when you got all these other leagues that are going to be on CBS, NBC, ABC, ESPN, easily available. You know, can you see like the Washington Huskies say, yeah, we want you to play for us, and you're going to play on national TV on Apple TV Plus if your parents pay $100. You know, well, you could go to Michigan and play. You can play on CBS and then play on over-the-air national
ABC.
Yeah, exactly. For most of the other big conferences. So once that contract offer hit, Washington and Oregon jumped ship to the big. Apparently, they had already been vetted when the USC UCLA thing happened last year. So they basically right before an important meeting, they just decided we're leaving. We're going to the big. We've been approved. So we're gone. And then like a few hours after that, the four corner schools, Arizona State, and Utah said they would officially join Colorado in the Big 12, which now leaves 4 Pac-12 teams as of 2025.
The Pac-4?
The Pac-4, yeah. Stanford, Cal, Washington State, and Oregon State. And I think the best term I heard for it was they were relegated. Essentially, when it comes down to it, that's really what happened. They've gone from the odds are they're going to go from a Power 5 conference to a Group of 5 conference. Less money, less attention, less chance of making making the playoffs, the chance to go to a bowl game. And for the most part, it's not really it's kind of fault of their own because apparently the Pac-12 has been an administrative mess for years. Between the Pac-12 network being a huge failure to Commissioner Larry Scott being, I guess, probably the worst commissioner of all of big-time sports, who screwed up the TV contracts and it couldn't keep the league together. It's a shame because when you see charter members of the Pac leave, the Oregon and Washington have been a part of that conference or some version of the conference since like the 19-teens or something like that. Back when it was like the Pacific Coast Conference, it was called that, the PCC. When you got charter members bailing on the conference, it's just a matter of time before teams that don't have as long a history, like the Arizonas, they say, well, what the hell are we going to do? This is essentially because it essentially turned into every man for themselves, and that's what you could never see happen in the Big Ten or the SEC. We're already starting to see it in the ACC with Florida State making all kinds of noises how unhappy they are right now. So I never thought I would see this happen where a major conference that has been there for my entire life, not counting the Southwestern, which was that was a whole other can of worms for essentially it was the Wild West of and plus it was an all Texas league essentially. But to see a Power 5 conference just splinter in a matter of hours. It was, I guess, shocking, but then again, not so shocking in today's environment.
It's sort of weird to think it just basically imploded, right?
Yeah.
Over the last year.
Yeah, really, for essentially over the last year.
And probably the only way to do that is, like, as you described, it has to be like utter internal dysfunction.
Yeah.
And I'm actually surprised that the universities allowed it to go that long.
Yeah.
So.
Well, there's a lot of talk that you got Stanford and Cal are kind of in their own little academic worlds. When they're a completely different situation in Washington State and Oregon State, who are essentially, those are the two. I think Stanford and Cal will be okay. Because in the end, I think if they lost big time football, I don't think they would care just because they're Stanford and Cal Berkeley. That's just, that's they're a different breed altogether. They'd be like Chicago. They left the Big Ten decades ago, and they don't. That's just what it was. No, they're academic first schools. But Washington State and Oregon State, those two teams, those are the two I think that are. Those are the two I don't want to say feel bad for, because what happens in the Pac-12 was all of their own making for the most part. But to see those two schools, legitimate Power 5 schools who have played some very entertaining football. I mean, I love watching Pac-12 after dark. That's been some fun football. I mean, I'm watching, and oftentimes they would have teams like, I would love laying in bed and watch Washington State play Oregon State, or Oregon State play Cal, or whatever. I love those late night games. And to see teams like that being left out in the cold, and now and the Big 12 says we're done. The Big Ten's like, we got the two schools from the Pacific Northwest we don't want you. And so it's like, all that's left is like, let's go to the Mountain West. That's really like going from out. That's barely a step up from the MAC, essentially. Going from Power 5 conference to a conference that's above the MAC but well below like the ACC and the Pac in the Big 12.
But if you have no other choice, then
but it makes you wonder what's going to happen to those schools when they lose that big TV money. But because the contracts you get in a conference like the Mountain West or the AAC or some of those other Group of 5 schools, they pales in comparison. I mean, Big Ten teams are going to make like $70 million a season, and I think something like the Mountain West you might get $7 million. I mean, or even if supposedly if the Pac-12 had agreed to a contract last year, these teams would have gotten around the same money that the Big 12 got, which is around, I think, $31 to $32 million a year. Now a lot, now teams like Washington State and Oregon State are going to get a fraction of that. I mean, and honestly, I don't think this is over. You'd have to think that there's going to be an even bigger. It's probably going to end up the Big Two. It's going to be the Big Ten and the SEC, and they're going to have. It'll end up being like the NFC and the AFC or something like that. There's going to be 32 teams or 36 teams and 2 conferences, and at least that feels like that's the direction we're heading.
It kind of looks like that's the way it's getting carved up, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because there's teams in the ACC who are desperate to get out because they're locked into that TV contract till 2036.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, that's why you got teams like Clemson and Florida State saying they see Northwestern getting $70 million a year, and they're like, what about us? Hey, you guys are the ones that signed the damn contract 4 years ago. You guys are the one that made the mistake of locking yourself in in a long term. Much like Larry Scott screwed up by not even, accepting offers that they could have had back in the day. Then you see someone like Jim Delaney, who was brilliant. As much as the ex-Big Ten commissioner Jim Delaney got ragged on by fans, the man was a brilliant businessman. He started the Big Ten network. When he did TV deals, he always made sure that they weren't locked in for like a deal like the ACC got locked in the 15 years. It was always like 6 or 7, something a little more reasonable where they could start renegotiating after 4 or 5. So, that's the Big Ten and the SEC have been very, very well run leagues The rest of them, not so much. But I know what it also gets me. We're talking about colleges as pro sports. We're talking about their well-run leagues.
Yes.
No, we should be talking about, these are great academic institutions who happen to play sports. It feels like it's the other way around nowadays.
Or it's just much more out in the open.
That's the other thing.
We're not hiding it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
because the next step is, players being considered employees, which essentially, if you ask me, they are. And next thing you know, we could see unions or at the very least collectives and things like that and bargaining agreements. But then again, this has been coming for a long time. This also, this has been building to this point. When you have coaches making $100 million contracts and you have schools making billions of dollars over the years on the backs of this labor, this is where you're going to end up because people see how much money is being thrown out there. And you see all the schools, like the Michigans and the Ohio States and the Alabamas, and the Floridas and, the LSU is building these literal football sports palaces. It's like they're taking in so much money, they have to spend it on something. So they spend it on absolutely ridiculous facilities. So I think, I think it's great that at least the players are starting to see some of this. And I have a feeling the next step is for the players to have even more protections, be it, I'm no expert when it comes to legal stuff like that, but I think, NIL is just the start. It's already semi-pro. It's essentially going to turn into a pro league just at, I don't know. It's just that it's changed so much. Well, when did you graduate? You went to Michigan. So when did you graduate from Michigan?
93.
93. So you was Bo still coach then, or was that early?
No, my freshman year was Bo's last year.
Okay, so you're the Gary Moeller era for the most part.
The Gary Moeller, Elvis Gerbach, Desmond Howard, Fab Five.
Yes.
So I was there during the Fab Five.
Yep. And, that's another whole discussion about what's going about that kind of thing now. And that kind of might be something we might cover in our Jerk of the Week as well. So we should probably kind of get to that because we've been talking for almost 2 hours because we've been going on so many tangents. So I'm sure we'll have more to talk about college sports, especially, because I know Greg isn't, Greg is a Group of Five guy. He's an Eastern guy, Eastern Michigan. So, as long as his team shows up on Tuesday and Wednesday nights, I think he might be happy. So anyway, with that, we need to start wrapping things up. So, Nick, who's your Jerk of the Week?
I'm going to continue on with the NCAA theme.
All right, please do. Yeah.
And I had a couple options, so I'm going to go with this one. And it's this whole farce with Jim Harbaugh.
Yes.
Coming into some sort of agreement with the NCAA on his penalty for whatever it is he did.
Buying hamburgers, essentially.
That's right. And then the NCAA saying, no, we're going to investigate it further.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's so ridiculous and nuanced, all the rules that, and then there's the other part that I'm actually agreeing with Jim Harbaugh's attorneys. Like, when Harbaugh and the university were asked about the infractions, they're not allowed to say a single word. There's a gag order on them. But the NCAA is able to say something and make their own comment and their own, and that's where that whole stupid cheeseburger comment came in.
Yes, it's not a cheeseburger, is the line.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
It's like either shut up or tell us what it is. Why are you reporting nothing?
Yeah.
To the media. And just the whole ridiculousness of everything.
Yeah.
And that's getting kind of tiresome. So the NCAA and their infractions committee or whoever is handling this is my Jerk of the Week.
Yeah. Is there a more ineffectual group than the NCAA infractions committee? It's like they're doing this that they're trying to justify their existence, I think, at this point.
Right.
And it's like, that's another whole discussion where the teams we've been talking about, is essentially becoming the power two, and maybe there's two little guys, the power two and the middle two, that are forming their own ruling sanctioning body, and just getting rid of the NCAA altogether. Let the NCAA handle the lower divisions, and they'll have their own thing. Which honestly makes a hell of a lot of sense the way we're going, because the stuff that the NCAA has always enforced is becoming illegal. The stuff that happened at SMU, the Pony Express days. That was the death penalty in the late 80s. That's like Tuesday this week, today.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm completely with you there. The NCAA's, this whole Harbaugh stuff in the NCAA, I'm completely with you there. It's absolutely ridiculous. If Harbaugh was willing to take 4 games, I think that says volumes about where that they had come to a perfectly, because Harbaugh, we both know what Harbaugh is like when it comes to taking a stand and his principles. If he's willing to take a 4-game suspension to compromise on that, I think you should take it and run with it. Now I'm sure Harbaugh's going to dig in his heels, knowing Harbaugh.
And why wouldn't he?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, why wouldn't he? And he could dig in his heels on things anyway. I mean, he was digging his heels on this too.
Yeah.
But if you look at like the infractions, fine. These are slap of the wrist type penalties. It's not like whatever that crazy thing that was going on at UNC with all the students not showing up to class and
having their tests taken for them. Yeah.
Right. Or Louisville and whatever that real crazy thing that happened to the basketball team.
Yeah. Essentially blowing hookers.
Yeah, exactly.
And Rick Pitino.
And, it was like, I mean, what did Harbaugh do? He looked at on video, like through Zoom or whatever. He watched some guys work out.
Yeah.
Seriously? I mean, like, okay, fine. And he supposedly lied to them. Like, I don't know about that part, but
yeah, that's like, or for that matter, maybe he, it was, I believe, and most of this happened during the pandemic, which was talking about things were kind of the wild west at that point anyway, because no one knew what was going on. Period, for the most part.
Right.
When they had dead times and you couldn't talk to people, and it was a whole big mess during the pandemic. And yeah, I'm completely with you. That's a good call in the NCAA, and for all we know, Harbaugh digs at his heels. The suspension might come next year, and he'll be off the NFL anyway. Because knowing Jim Harbaugh, he's probably going to look again. So I'm with you there. Yeah,
that's more annoying than the.
Yeah, exactly. All right, I'm going to be a little more serious. My jerk of the week is Wander Franco of the Tampa Bay Rays. Their starting shortstop, who they just gave a big money contract to, and the Rays never give big money to anybody, but this is a young player, a generational type talent that most teams want to build around. And then word came this past week that he would not be traveling with the team during their West Coast road trip going to San Francisco. And it turned out, it leaked out that we're not sure if all the details just yet, but there is a lot going on here because this is an international incident, because the Dominican Republic is investigating this, that Wander Franco may have been, he's alleged to have been in a relationship with a minor. This is career-ending stuff, realistically. And not even getting to the legal and the moral stuff of this. Baseball-wise, this is the sort of thing where the Rays may just have to cut ties with this guy. This is pull the moral turpitude clause if this is found out to be true. And from all accounts, there was a lot of social media stuff going on that were red flags about this. It's this is one of those things where there's smoke, there's likely fire, and a lot of that fire started on social media. But now there's reports that Franco was on a restricted list, so he is being paid, but he is not with the team. It's being reported that the Rays and Franco have mutually agreed to this, essentially. That so that alone says Franco he's not fighting this. I think he did make one Instagram video denying the charges, but then that was deleted. So this is really beginning to feel like Franco has gotten himself into cover his ass mode, and this has all the signs it's going to end very badly because, for lack of a better word, he may be a pedophile. And this is the thing. He is under contract with the Tampa Bay Rays through 2033 if the club option is. This is the first long-term contract the Rays have given in years, if ever. And all of a sudden they have this blow up in their face because essentially their star player maybe involved in a relationship with, we don't even know how young the person is. We're just told it's a minor. So we don't know if it's a teenager. We don't know if it's tweet. We don't know enough. But we do know enough is going on here that Major League Baseball is investigating, and the Dominican Republic, which is more alarming, is investigating this. And apparently there's, it's this is not looking good. I'll just put it that way. So my jerk of the week is is Wander Franco, because I think I just said why, because he may be a pedophile, and the odds are it's not looking good for him right now. I will also add, this is going to break my Tampa Bay fan. My dad is a huge Tampa Bay Rays fan, and this is going to, I don't want to say kill him because he's 83 years old. This is going to disappoint him to no end, because he thought this team was World Series bound. Now this team's completely falling apart, especially now if their ace having Tommy John surgery, McClanahan, and now the stuff with Franco. Oh, the Rays for a model franchise are going through a lot of shit right now. But if this stuff about Franco is true, throw the book out. That's my jerk. All right, with that, let's get the hell out of here, Nick. That was a lot of fun. I thought Greg and I go on tangents. We go on damn vacation. With that, though, anything you'd like to add? Anything you'd like to promote? Anything going in? Your social media, things like that.
Well, I'm on Twitter as Nick Milanovich, and I restrict my conversations to Detroit sports and a couple other items. And I honestly tried to stay out of politics, because we could have jerk of the week like from now till the day we die.
Exactly.
But I don't get into that on social media. It's just a lost cause.
Yeah, so. I'm with you there. It's because I will say there was a point where I was heavy into the politics, especially on Facebook. Now it's just pictures of the cabin and pictures of the dog, and back, pictures of the lake. We aren't going to convince anybody of anything at this point. This is, your politics are your politics, and that, especially on Twitter. Twitter can be crazy when it comes to that kind of stuff. So I admire your restraint on Twitter. It's got to be. I'm sure it's got to be hard sometimes. I'll give you that. I'll say that. All right. Especially talking to Greg.
To ignore it.
All right. As always, don't forget there's Greg Eno's Substack. Please go sign up for that. Again, there will be links in the show notes to Nick's Twitter, to Greg's Twitter. I think it's at Greg Eno, and of course his Substack, which we talked about on the podcast tonight. You're welcome, Greg. Or actually, you got to thank Nick for bringing that up. And of course, when it comes to the podcast itself, please listen at the usual places. If you want to listen to the Knee-Jerks podcast, I think we'll probably just stick with that and get rid of the Eno and Big Al. Since we now have a third wheel and Nick with us, I don't know, maybe we'll go with Greg, Nick, and Big Al. I don't know yet, but at the very least, the Knee-Jerks podcast, you can search for that, and it's any place podcasts are found. Apple Podcasts, YouTube, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, Amazon Music, Radio Public, the Kneejerks.net. That is our homepage. All the links to all the things we talk about, and specifically the social media and where to listen type stuff, all the links are right there. Please go there, and you can download the MP3 as well. Do what you want with that. And I think that about covers it. So, Nick, I guess I'll see you in 2 weeks. Hopefully our happy wanderer, Greg Eno, will be back.
That's right. He'll be nice and relaxed.
Yes.
So.
And of course, I will be back as well, because I think I'll be back. I know I'll be in town for the next podcast. I hope so. Good Lord. Anyway, with that, let's get the hell out of here. So, this is Al saying good evening, good luck, and aloha.
Adios, Al.